Yeah. So we were talking about the problem of being able to estimate the amount of gas that each transaction uses for tractor orders. So it looks like the current tractor operator is executing, for example, 2 or 3 orders within one transaction. And we had a problem, or we continue to have a problem with trying to estimate the proper amount of gas that each of those individual transactions used because we only know the total amount of gas used the whole transaction. And we add a kind of a marker for gas remaining before and after the execution of the transaction itself, but or the tractor order within inside of the transaction. The problem is that tractor order does also not include some extra gas used by some modifier functions that was written with securing the whole system, and that basically goes through and checks like the balances of all of the assets that are within Pinto, like all the ERC20 tokens, stuff like that, before and after the transaction to verify that everything is still there in the way that it should be, so that the whole system is solvent. And that makes it a whole lot more difficult to exploit the system. But there's some marginal amount of gas used in order to make that do that before and after check. And we were talking about ways to measure that, and basically, I think that it could possibly be measured by. So we know how much gas is used within just for the execution of the blueprints themselves, and so we can take that amount of gas, and we can also look at the overall amount of gas used within the transaction, and then that difference should be fairly constant across all tracker executions because it's like a constant check, a constant amount of gas used to do the security modifiers, and so we could measure how much gas that part uses, and then divvy that up amongst the actual blueprints that were executed in that transaction, and then we can at least have an estimate for like the extra overhead that it takes to run each one, and then basically just add that to each one, and then it helps us get a better estimate for the actual amount of gas used per blueprint execution, and then therefore better data around like the profit for operators, and then also that helps the fee market determine what an appropriate fee would be as well.
Awesome. Thank you for it. I just put it in the channel written formula of what you just wrote said. Is this correct? Overall gas minus gas used per tractor is the gas used for secure beanstalk and other things. And then we divide that by the number of tractor order executed that transaction, and then we add that. That's the additional gas from the modifiers to add to each order.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think this is great. This is pretty close, I think.
Well, yeah, I
That's
mean,
awesome.
I think it could work in like the happy case, but I mean, you need to keep in mind that there's nothing stopping people from performing other actions that have nothing to do with Pinto within this transaction as well. So we can't just take, the like we can't really just look at the overall gas. But I think what Ford was suggesting is like we essentially have we have like some sample executions that we know are solely interacting with Pinto, and like evaluate what is the overhead gas amount that didn't get captured by the event. I mean that could work, except like I mean it would work like for now, but just as things change in the future, like that gas might not always be constant if like different operations are added, like before or like as part of those invariant checks, for example. But that could definitely be a reasonable approach if we're comfortable just like writing in like a constant value for some like extra gas.
Yeah, I guess what we could do is just look at one of the tractor orders in isolation and then just isolate the secure beanstalk gas. And then given that's a fixed cost, we can just append that to each gas order, or sorry, to each order,
exactly.
rather than doing this formula.
Yeah, I think that'd be more reasonable. I mean, the amount's going to be pretty marginal either way, but it'll be on the order of like a few cents probably, but it would be slightly more accurate.
Awesome. Cool. That's all I have for that question. Don't have too much to talk about in this dev call. I know maybe Ford has any thoughts over the recent tractor launch. It's been a long time coming. It was just a Herculean effort by Ford to get this going. So wanted to shout them out.
Thanks. Yeah, it was definitely with assists as well. Major help on the data side from Pinto Pirate. Burr was a huge help on the UI side, as well as Floyd Rainweather, Frio on the contracts, and then the rest of the crew for testing and feedback. Oh, and then of course Pinto Mushroom with all of the design for everything. So definitely a team effort. But yeah, I was focused on it for quite some time. For me personally, it's really exciting just to see the temperature start dropping already. There hasn't been a single season that's gone by since the release of Tractor in which soil has not been sold out, which is quite an indicator that there actually was a lot of demand for soil. It's just that the friction of getting out your wallet and signing a transaction every single hour, at least consistently enough to make the cultivation factor continue to increase every single hour, was too high, and there were periods of time where people just couldn't keep sowing. But now with this automation, we've seen it drop from the temperature was at a high of like 1404. Now we're already down to 1362. So something like 42% drop. I know that Tractor was released. I guess the temperature was probably around 1386 then. If I had to guess, I would say people started to sow more frequently, just looking at the chart based on the anticipation of the release of Tractor and knowing that that soil will that temperature will not be available as people start to sow when Tractor comes out. So yeah, super cool. There's already let's see, at maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 like potentially executable orders each season, if I'm saying this correctly. Um, and then there's a number as well too that are just at higher temperatures that have already perhaps become invalid because people might not have been anticipating the temperature dropping as quickly as it had. So quite interesting. Yeah, really looking forward to see how this plays out with the increase of the cultivation factor, because right now we have something like, I don't know, 1,268 soil available each season, whereas at a minimum we were around 154. It looks like. So we've already had what is that, like an 8x in the availability of soil, and it still continues to sell out, which is pretty cool. So the cultivation factor is currently at what is it at? It's at 9.96%, so basically 10%. So we already had a 10x in the increase in the amount of soil. So we can have another 10x from here. So that would increase the soil availability from 1,200 each season to 12,000 each season. I'm not sure that it will continue to sell out each season to 12,000, but that's part of the interesting idea behind this snowball here. So yeah, exciting. Curious what others think.
Super exciting. I mean, yeah, this is the first time in ever the cultivation factor has increased, more than just marginally, right? I feel like I've seen them at most, it's increased by like 3%. So seeing it go to 10% and, not stopping I think is really cool. We were discussing about the ability to potentially change orders in a more frictionless way. I think, like you said, there's a lot of orders that are bidding high, and for me, I feel like there's new information of how the slope of the temperature is changing, or just having new information might want them to change their order more rapidly. I think having that ability will really increase the efficiency in which people sell. Just because I think we've seen a trend that like UX or decreasing the friction really does matter. Like even with a simple UX change of withdrawing selling one transaction, more people were selling. I feel like the same effect will occur by having a cancel and replace order.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think that's a great improvement. We wouldn't be able to directly correlate the new order with the old order, just because like we could potentially with the bots if it's in the same transaction, which is the way that would make the most sense in terms of how to build it. But in terms of like, if you click through my my Tractor orders, we could show like, oh, here was your previous canceled orders and here's your current order, but it might not be that easy to correlate like, oh, here was the order that you replaced your order with in the past. Of course,
Mm.
it could be done theoretically, but in terms of purely at an event level, it would be we don't have events set up for that. So maybe something that we can add in the future actually for Tractor. It would be cool to implement at the Tractor facet level, like a replace order type of event, and then we can have more granularity, more clarity in terms of these are not just separate individual orders that are getting created and destroyed, but there's like a chain of them as the user continued to update their order. That would be a cool feature I think that we can add to the core protocol level of the contract.
So you're saying like, let's say someone places an order for 1,000 Pintos, and then at the time of changing it, 500 Pintos have been sown. When we create an order, we would have to make a new order where the max Pintos to sow is 500. And then from the UI's perspective, it would look like a completely new order. There is no chain of orders. Like we couldn't update the UI very easily to show that this is a part of an old order and it's just been updated to reflect new temperature or something.
Yeah. But what I'm suggesting is that we could update, the core Pinto protocol tractor facet to add a new function that's like replace order, where you can pass in the old blueprint and the new blueprint, and it would have like a special event that's emitted as like a replace event, and then we could keep a chain of these orders as they get updated, and that would be useful for any type of order, not just a soil order book modification, but in the future when we have like convert support or buying and selling support or um, automated claiming on behalf of the user. Maybe the user wants to claim at varying levels of grown stock or something. So there's a number of use cases that kind of replace idea could be used for.
Awesome. What do you feel like could be improved in the UI right now?
So there's a couple outstanding things from Pinto Mushroom that I'm still working through. He gave me a list right before launch, like a final list. I only made it through about 2/3 of those items, and so I have the last third pretty much done. Um, Except there's some things around the selection of the tokens, so or the fund order using. So if you click on that, then it shows you like all your deposited tokens you can choose from, as well as the strategy, the token with best price or token with least seeds. And so there's like some UI related things around that need to be changed. Um, and then Pinto Pirate has actually created an API that can return all the data that we need for what we show now for the tractor orders. So there's basically three main parts where we query, or four, I guess, where we query what all the existing uh, published blueprints, which are then called requisitions, are. So it's the main field activity page on the top. You have the orders that are going to potentially execute next season. Then we have, if you click on see all tractor orders, then there's a view that's like the soil order book. So that will show all the orders, including the ones that are not likely to execute next season because they have too high of a temperature, for example. And then there's also another tab, the execute soil orders, which I called the plow tab underneath the hood, which allows you to simulate all the existing transactions and see if any of those can be executed. So all three of those, we do different types of queries on all the published requisitions, and then also under my tractor orders as well. But there we can filter by, just the tractor orders that you have published. So those are the four key parts that we get data from, and each of those have like a slightly different way of grabbing the data. Like the my tractor orders, it doesn't care about other people's orders, so it can filter that down. And then it also doesn't care like what the order of your execution of orders are, and if you would potentially use up all your Pinto. Although I think in the future we should add UI improvements so that it will show like, hey, by the way, here's your orders, except you don't actually have enough Pinto in order to fulfill your orders. That would be a great improvement that we can add to the My Tractor Orders panel. And so Pirate has written this API that gives us this data. It's just that I need to kind of go, back into the UI and do quite a refactor to split out the two possible data sources. So either the raw events that we can pull from on-chain like we're doing now, or from this external API where you can just, query it and it passes you back all the JSON data that you need pre-processed. And so it should, in a perfect world, the UI would be able to handle like both sources, because when developing locally, it's nice to be able to query, without having to run this API thing, except we also want to be able to run the API server locally anyway to make sure that everything is working correctly. But it's kind of cool just to have a fallback to, so that if something does happen with the API server, then we can fall back to the raw events. However, I can see in the future, if this continues to get more and more complicated, then it could be just too complicated to maintain these two separate sources of data. And really, you could argue that it's a waste of dev resources to have to maintain both. So in the longer term future, I can see us moving over to just the API. But that's like all of that stuff I just described. The only effect that you'll see on a user is basically data loading faster. You wouldn't be able to tell anything else about where the data is coming from. But it's a lot of work kind of to switch that data over. So I'm not sure what my time frame will be on that. I'm focused just on kind of the UI and UX stuff at the moment still, because I feel like we haven't hit the limits of what we can do in terms of querying, just the raw events in order to show the data. So it does seem like things are loading a little bit slower than they initially were, but so far it's working more or less okay. So for now, that's on the slight back burner. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Cool. That's all the questions I have related to Tractor. I'm not sure there are some people in the chat if they have any questions about Tractor before we move on.
I think we should get some more operators going and give roast beef a run for his money. Because I've noticed that sometimes they execute at like 11 minutes after the hour instead of 10 minutes after the hour. So I don't know how frequently his bot is checking, but I did write a kind of an open source version of the bot. It seems like he has made some private modifications to it, but the open source one should already be enough actually to get your own bot running if you're interested in capturing some of that the operator tips. Maybe Pirate, do you happen to know offhand like what the total number of tips have been so far?
Offhand, no. I could look for it. I was just going to say that regarding the executed at 11 minutes rather than 10 minutes, that's currently, I don't know if I'd call it an issue, but we'll just call it a limitation on the current bot implementation, that the alerts in Discord are actually showing up about a minute late. That's expected currently, and that's something that I'm going to try to minimize, but yeah.
Cool, good to know. So perhaps they are getting executed really efficiently.
Yeah, they're getting executed after about 6 seconds from observation. Although the one this last season, I just happened to notice that actually didn't get executed and someone manually executed it.
Nice.
But
so
yeah,
usually
it's pretty quick.
Yeah, cool. So for
Yeah,
those who,
I mean, for the tip amounts, I would just look in the Tractor channel, and you can just kind of look at what a lot of the tips have been. I mean, it's like 20, 30 cents per execution. But yeah, I mean, there's probably been, I don't know, maybe not quite 100 executions so far, but definitely quite a few. Looks like there's like 2 or 3 per season on average. Yeah.
I think we're at approaching the 24 hours after launch. So yeah, 2 or 3 per season, maybe 10 cents per season.
Yeah, a few dollars.
Yeah, a few dollars. Yeah. Cool. But for those who missed it, you can go to under the field activity on the field page. If you click on see all Tractor orders, then there's kind of like 2 tabs on the top, view soil orders and execute soil orders. If you click on that second tab, you can actually kind of be a human powered bot where you can click simulate all transactions, and it will simulate all of the potentially executable requisitions that have been published on chain. And then you can manually execute them if you want to. And you can potentially do this faster than the bot is doing it to earn some tips. So at approximately 10 minutes after the hour, you can try to give that a shot.
Awesome. Yeah, just wanted to say the 10 minutes is because of the morning auction. I think currently the orders that are pending required morning auction to be concluded. So that takes about 10 minutes. Like, a lot can change. So who knows? I think or Pinto said in the chat today there were some orders executed during the morning auction as a result of selling out immediately after. So awesome to see.
Just looking through the UI here, it would be really cool if, like, when you hover over a sower's address, if it would give like a little bit of kind of like a profile card about them, like what are their total deposits? How many pods do they have? What are their open tractor orders? That would be pretty cool. Now you can use a third party wallet in order to like view our UI as a different person. But if there's a way, just kind of hover over like a user's address and get that information without having to use other tools, that would be pretty cool, I think.
I like
So
the
we can
hover effect you have in the address where you can hover over their address and then it highlights in green the orders they've executed in the field.
Oh yeah, yeah. I like that too. Yeah, that was just an idea that kind of came to me when I saw. I found myself like highlighting someone's address and then doing like a copy paste into the search bar in my browser just to highlight the others. And it was like, shoot, this should be just like a built-in feature where you hover over and it says, what the sowers are. So now you see the same sowers every season. Basically, it looks like it's mostly two people who are getting it each season. So it's pretty cool to visualize that by just hovering over those users' addresses.
So cool.
So I heard some of the rest of the crew was working on some kind of UI strike thing. Have you guys talked about that publicly?
Not publicly, but it was just a push to add more features on the UI that makes the website a little bit more tangible and like more easy to digest. So I think Burr is working on this, and I think he's finalizing it. But one of the things that are being added to the field silo and pod marketplace is the FAQ section, as well as some graphs. If Burr is here to talk about it.
Make the UI slightly more digestible, slightly easier to understand. A little bit more stats here and there to like the silo page, FAQs to the silo page, field page, and also the pod marketplace. And then the idea behind like this whole strike thing is to I guess like ship fast and try to really add new features quickly. And so yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for the update.
Great. I know Pinto Pirate has recently posted an issue on the GitHub about a potential model improvement. I would like to take this time to kind of talk and discuss about it, and bring I guess open it up for discussion, if that's okay with you, Pinto Pirate.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll just post this issue here in the various kitchen chats for people's viewing. I think I shared this. I think it was on Monday. But yeah, I'm happy to kind of read through and talk through it. The basic idea is, recently we introduced a convert down penalty, such that when the price of Pinto is above peg, or above its value target rather, if farmers in the silo decide to convert their Pinto into LP, the protocol would be assessing some kind of grown stock penalty, such that for deposits that have accumulated a lot of grown stock, they would then lose some of that grown stock if they were to just convert down immediately. And kind of one of the benefits of that is that it would allow the system, the price, to spend more time above the value target, by disincentivizing that behavior of kind of instantly converting to LP. And so what I'm suggesting is, kind of in line with that same idea, is to actually implement some threshold such that if the price is above 1, but still below some other threshold, the convert penalty would actually be amplified. So currently, I believe I can just actually find it quickly here. The current convert down penalty, if the price were above $1 right now, would be 34%. And that would increase the more seasons spent above 1. But so what I've proposed, and I mean the actual threshold is certainly open for discussion, but let's just say, for talking, if the price is above 1 but it's below 1.005, if the convert down penalty in that situation would be increased up to just 100%. So and what that means in practice is that if a convert were to occur, whatever amount was converted between that price bound it would still be allowed, but it would just, the grown stock would be forfeited. So yeah, and I mean, I wrote some other stuff on that document as well. You know, I don't know if it's helpful, I can just kind of read through most of it, but I think I kind of mostly just gave the high level of the idea there, and basically like the main goal is just to increase the incentives around stock, because you know, if more time is going to be potentially spent above the value target, this will give the system more of a chance to expand and issue new Pinto, which makes stock more attractive to hold. And you know, hopefully will make farmers more likely to want to you know, convert up in the current state, to gain more seeds so they can start building stock, etc.
Awesome. Thank you, Pinto Pirate. So, you know, some questions I have regarding this. I guess your commentary of the current convert penalty is that it's not, well, one, it might not be strong enough, or two, the conditions aren't necessarily, like the conditions itself to trigger the convert penalty is not, or could be better, right? Because now we're adding a new parameter that, you know, kind of adjusts the convert penalty. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I mean, in practice, we haven't really seen yet, but yeah, I mean, I mean, my personal stance is that I don't think the convert down penalty in its current form is going to be, you know, as you say, strong enough to prevent, or not prevent, but just to like sufficiently disincentivize, you know, that converting behavior that we just discussed. But yeah, I mean, it's all theory at this point.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, you know, what if instead of this, just to like just discuss, you know, currently the penalty is 30% at a very low L2SR. And the reason why we've had this curve as a function of L2SR, or the penalty as a function of L2SR, is that, you know, the lower the L2SR is, the more dangerous, or the more closer the system is to a death spiral. And thus the curve was designed to lower the penalty, and lower the incentive to not convert, in favor of retaining liquidity. So, you know, with this new proposal, that portion of affecting the penalty based on L2SR is effectively eliminated, because of that. So I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on that, and whether you find, you know, to me, it's a trade-off of like increasing the attractiveness of stock versus retaining liquidity. Uh, and I'm
Yeah,
wondering, you know, your thoughts on that.
yeah. I mean, I do have some thoughts. So actually, I mean, I would sort of take like the opposite side of that, which is that when the L2SR is small, you know, by definition, that means there's a lot of Pinto relative to the LP, which means that there's actually a much larger amount that can be converted down. And as such, I would argue that the disincentive actually needs to be higher for a lower L2SR. Um, I mean, you know, obviously having the lower amount of liquidity is, as you mentioned, closer to a death spiral than, you know, than having a higher amount of liquidity. But at the same time, having a lower amount of liquidity, if we're saying that also means a lot more can be converted down, that also means that the system, you know, can't really meaningfully expand if the expectation is that the Pinto is going to get converted down. So like
Got it.
I feel like personally, like the penalty at a higher L2SR, because what you're saying is at a higher L2SR you want a higher penalty. I would actually argue that you don't need a higher penalty. Like like a lower penalty would be fine, because the overall amount of Pinto that's available to convert is going to be smaller anyway. So just like kind of in that sense, there's going to be less converts just by definition.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great point. That's an interesting point. You're saying that with a lower L2SR, although Pinto does want, and he does have an incentive to, you know, retain its liquidity, uh, it does not need to incentivize the converts aggressively, given that there's just a huge supply out there willing to convert compared to higher L2SRs.
Yeah, and I mean it's worth noting too is that this is a grown stock penalty, which means that new deposits, i.e. deposits that are gained from earned Pinto, like they'll be able to be converted essentially without any penalty because there's no grown stock associated with those deposits. So it's not like the protocol would be saying, oh, like no converts. It's just disincentivizing like the vast majority of the Pinto that makes up, the 80, let's just call it 85% of Pinto that's not in the LP. It's just disincentivizing all of that Pinto to convert.
Yeah, and of course, pods from the field become harvestable, and those would probably be either either exited or deposited, or perhaps even converted as well.
Yep, and that's what the protocol wants.
To Pirate's point, one interesting thing, if you look back on Bean, is like when it got out of the low L2SR, I don't think that convert existed at all then. So no one could convert down, and that actually allowed the system to recover back from its low point of L2SR. So I think that's a very interesting data point that we should keep in mind.
Totally agree. I'm curious to whether you should like this price, given that it's a static number, like is the intent, we should have this price like decrease over time as supply or something, or this is just a first step of many, adding this convert penalty implementation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be an interesting argument to have it decrease as the L2SR grows. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't spent too much time thinking about that side of it. I think you would want to do it based on the L2SR though, not the supply.
Yeah, I agree. I think above like maybe 60 or 70% L2SR, then probably the system has been expanding and you want people to be converting down efficiently to maintain the L2SR as the system grows.
Frijo, would you want to chat about like what are the technical requirements of implementing something like this?
Yeah, still thinking about it, to be honest. One question I had was, when you say 0.005 is a threshold, let's say someone converts at 0.006 and then they convert down such that the final price is 0.4. Like, how should the user get penalized there?
Well, I would think they would get penalized on the second half of that convert. So like the first half of it from the 1.006 to the 1.005 would get penalized according to whatever is the current convert down penalty. And then the portion of it from 1.005 to 1.004 would get penalized 100%.
Right. So what we're literally looking for is the price after the convert, really, rather than the price at the convert.
Yeah, my assumption is we would want to still keep like the current penalty implementation. It would just be like introducing this additional like range where the penalty was amplified.
Yeah. I mean, from an implementation perspective, we would just append this, or we would just augment the convert down penalty. In the convert down penalty, there's a section in there that checks whether P is greater than Q. Q being a price above that's deemed excessively high, which is currently 1.025. And when that happens, the penalty is removed. So, the easiest or the simplest implementation would be to add, similarly with that threshold, just add another threshold, which is 1.005, and then create a full penalty there. The issue with that is, what we just kind of mentioned before, where if someone wanted to convert from 1.006 down below 0.005, their whole deposit would get penalized. The UI would need to determine like how many pintos they can convert beforehand, and then convert just to 0.005, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you're saying if it went slightly below, then they would end up losing all their stock.
Yeah, it's like an unfortunate implementation detail. Like with the P over Q uh, thing, for example, someone could convert at 0.3 down to peg uh, and get no stock penalty.
Mm,
So similar to that. Uh,
yeah.
Obviously, with the UI in this case, in the UI, we could split up their deposit. Like we could split up their amount, in the back end such that two converts happen, and the penalty is kind of restricted to the
Well,
amount that's below.
yeah. We would have to watch out for like slippage there too. There'd have to be some kind of, safeguards.
Yeah, I mean, we
But
use
yeah, I
the
mean,
instantaneous reserves, which is the manipulation resistant reserves, in order to calculate Q there.
I'm
So we would
curious if
just use
you
the same.
I'm curious if you think that implementation can be changed though, because that to me that doesn't seem ideal. Like the 1.03 down to 1, like not getting any penalty, like that doesn't seem ideal.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
it would just require a lot more work because the penalty just looks at the stock rather than the amount in deposits. Once you're in the convert, yeah, I mean, the other thing, I guess the other interesting thing is that, the price we calculate before, is a function of the largest liquidity well rather than the aggregate price. Uh, this is just a byproduct of Beanstalk's open source code, which used the largest liquidity well. So, in that sense, the price slippage is the most accurate, and you have to, you know, update that to aggregate throughout to all the wells. But from my perspective, like, the P to Q is a issue, is an inefficiency, you know, but I don't think it's uh dangerous per se.
no, I mean this one just makes me nervous if like someone accidentally converts too much and, and lost all their stock.
Yeah, with the P zero point above 0.005, you would need to add a check in the UI such that they wouldn't lose the stock. Uh, so that we can circumvent on the UI level.
Can we add like a parameter that they can pass like a minimum grown stock per PDV or something? So like the function will revert.
Definitely, that can definitely be done. I'm just wondering if it's easier to just add a view function that checks the uh, grown stock per PDV and the UI checks that, or to adjust the function signature to add that. We usually try to build stuff in a backwards compatible way, such that people who have built stuff in the past. Well, I guess in this case, not much has been built. But for instance, if we had the convert order book and we created a convert blueprint, this would get bricked among or once that convert signature changes. So I try to minimize signature changes for that reason. But we can also, I mean, what we would do, we can also do it in a pipe call where we would check their grown stock after, before and after as well.
Yeah, it would be nice to add some helpers for that, actually. Like looking at what I had to go through with the tractor stuff, I think when we get to convert with tractor, there's a number of helpers we could add that will like revert if the user wants to in certain cases where they didn't get the stock output that they expect. Because now it's kind of hard to build with just pure farm calls.
Yeah, let's have the discussion once we do that. I mean, and more helper functions for doing stuff like that is definitely helpful, both on the UI and factor in front. I guess the other thing I would like to also know is, I know you talked briefly in the main chat on what the delta P is at that price. It would be nice to know, have a more thorough analysis on what that delta P is. I feel like uh, having that and then calculating the delta P or getting different delta Ps at different prices would give us a better number we can choose for this value. So specifically for like the stable swap implementation, no, the stable swap is very efficient at prices very close to 1. So I'd imagine that the delta P would be much higher uh, for that price. So I'm interested to get that number. And the power, do you think that's something you could tackle, or do you think you'll need some help from to get those numbers, to get that analysis?
Yeah, we could chat about it.
Awesome. Cool. I mean, yeah, this seems like an interesting idea. I'm happy to proceed. I definitely want to see the effects. And for me, I think just the ability for Pinto to also to hover around slightly above its value target is something that we haven't really seen yet. So I do want to see the behavior of the system once that occurs. So I'm happy to pursue this.
Great.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have. Anyone else have anything you want to talk about? Well, I think that wraps it up. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you later.